Welcome back. Welcome back. This is Jonathan Beauregard, and this is Indestructible Souls. Welcome back to the show. I want to thank everyone for their continued support and watching the show, promoting the show, telling people about the show. And before I get started, once again, you can catch me at BeauregardTherapy.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Please go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, and like the show. Add yourself to the channel. And you can also listen to the audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. And so I have a very informative show that I'm going to get into that I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on, but I want to spend enough time on it to make sense. I was struggling with some technical difficulties, so I'm limited in my functionality today, but when it comes to the show and all that good stuff, but we're going to make it work. So today I want to talk about how do you get Black men into therapy? Very important topic. Why is it so important? And is it even possible to get certain Black men to participate in therapy? And so the reality is some men will just flat out refuse to come for whatever reason. So if you're in a relationship with a Black man, if you have a son who's a Black man, and so forth, or care about a Black man, and you feel like they could benefit from therapy, today I'm going to give you some tips and pointers and some insights as to why Black men don't come to therapy, and some of the reasons why may be some of the obvious. But I also want to give you some insight into how to get them into therapy and make it beneficial for them. Now, first off, one of the reasons why, well, there's several reasons why therapy for Black men is so important is because, as you know, there's many things that affect us when it comes to mental health. When we're talking about depression and anxiety and other life stressors, issues, insecurities, and all of those things, we are very vulnerable, meaning as Black men, in dealing with trauma, daily trauma, workplace trauma, environmental trauma, social trauma, family trauma, all of these different traumas. It is very important. Not only should we take care of our physical health, but we also have to take care of our mental health. One of the problems is that for particularly Black men, is that therapy is not seen as a viable option. Therapy is not seen as a resource to get help. And I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why. But when we talk about the daily anxieties, the daily depression, the having to deal with society, having to live up to this notion of what is a man and all of those things, I can go down the line as to why Black men need therapy, right? And I think for the most part, we all know why. And I don't want to go down that list. But first one I want to do is talk about why Black men don't come to therapy, right? Like I said, some of the answer may be the obvious, but some may not be so obvious. So here's the thing. Off the top, one of the things is we are not nurtured, we are not taught, we are not reared to talk about our emotions or express our emotions. And in fact, we are not taught to be vulnerable. We're not taught to express ourselves verbally. That's why so many men, when it comes to dealing with the various types of emotion, one of the reasons why we act out, and I mean that in the broad sense, is because we're rarely taught how to express our emotions. And it goes beyond the whole thing that men don't cry. It's we're not taught how to articulate our emotions. And also, when people do articulate the emotions, meaning black men, it is seen as weak and vulnerable. And we could come up with all the different names that men are called when they express their emotions. So when we just talk about traditionally and culturally, for us, we are not expected to express our emotions. And instead, there are so many different ways where acting out aggressively is encouraged and in a lot of cases even honored. We how could I put it? We honored the aggressive one. We honored the strong one. We honored the tough one. And so when we talk about just that aspect of it, going to a place like therapy where it is a vulnerable situation from start to finish, this is not an option. And so let me go down some of the several reasons why black men don't go to therapy. Well, let's talk about tradition. When we talk about tradition in terms of why black men don't go to therapy, well, all of us at some point or another either said or were told therapy is for white people. That's a white thing. That's not our cup of tea. We're also told that traditionally we are supposed to be able to fix our own problems. We are often told to suck it up. And so, therefore, when we're going through something, generally we don't reach out. And I said generally, we don't reach out because traditionally we're told that therapy or counseling of some sort is that's not for us. And so what happens is when we talk about tradition, when we talk about what's traditional for the black community, where do we go? We go to churches, which isn't, you know, not saying that that's a bad thing, but oftentimes when we talk about limiting our resources because of what's traditionally worked for us or doesn't work for us, then we don't access therapy. So here's another reason when we talk about why black men don't go to therapy. Pure masculinity, pride, the need to appear tough, the need or the expectation to have it all together. So when we talk about the tradition of masculinity, going to someone else to fix your problems, going to someone else to talk to tell about yourself, is just not an option for a lot of black men. Now, here's the thing, and I hear this all the time. Why would I tell somebody else my problems? I could fix them myself. Also, when we talk about masculinity, one of the things is for men, we are supposed to be fixers. We are supposed to be in a position to support, to provide, and to be able to take care of things and to fix other people. So very seldomly will we admit that we need to go to somebody else because it is against our sense or our perception of what manhood is and what masculinity is. So therefore, it's tough when we talk about it is not putting myself in a vulnerable position to where I have to go to somebody who may or may not look like me, think like me, and have the same walk as me. And then you want me to go talk to this stranger, which in essence is almost like punking yourself. That's how people see it because it goes against the core of masculinity. Here's another thing why black men don't come to therapy. It's a very simple one, or very common one, I should say. is the lack of trust. Now, like many other systems, therapy traditionally was not intended for us. When you look at a lot of the early research and so forth and all that, this was a white male dominated field, if you will. And so this was not necessarily made for us. But here's the other thing: not trusting people with my information, not trusting people with my life because I don't want to be judged or looked down upon, not trusting the safety of it, not trusting that somebody is going to be able to see the world the way I see the world. So we talk about trust, we're talking about the lack of trust in a broad sense. So a lot of times when we talk about building trust or the lack thereof, Black men are not going to come to therapy simply because I don't trust other people. I don't trust people with my life. I don't trust people with my information, let alone a stranger. And I go into this place and you expect me to be able to trust the process and trust them with my life. But more importantly, trust them with who I am and expect them to see me the way I see me. So the lack of trust. The other reason Black men don't come to therapy is the sake of feeling either coerced or trapped. And so a lot of times people will make ultimatums, particularly when someone's in a relationship or even a job, go to therapy or lose your job. It could be a spouse or whatnot saying you have to go to therapy. Well, Black men may come under those conditions, but it's not effective because they won't engage and immerse themselves into the process. So if being coerced, they may come to check it off the list, but they're not coming to heal or to really process what's going on with them. So here's another reason, and this happens quite often. For those who have been coerced into therapy, those who may have been forced by their wives or whatever certain circumstances, particularly people that they listen to, their friends, our buddies, our partners, our homies, or whatever, for us, how they see it. And then also what'll happen is, oh, I've been to therapy, that stuff doesn't work. So other people that they listen to telling them that the process doesn't work. So we have people telling them the process doesn't work. We have tradition based off of whether it's God, religion, and because this isn't a Black thing, we have masculinity why guys don't come to therapy, particularly Black men. No one likes to feel coerced or trapped, so that's another reason why Black men don't come to therapy. And then the lack of trust. So those are some basic reasons why Black men generally don't come to therapy. But it's very important, and I think I'll say it this way. Everybody that comes to therapy, and whether it's Black, whatever, not everybody's going to come to therapy because they have some type of severe mental health disorder. I have a lot of people, particularly Black men, that do come to therapy. Sometimes it's just working themselves or working something out in life. What do I mean by that? Stage of life, new career, things aren't going well at work, things aren't going well with the kids, things aren't going well with the wife or whatever. And so what happens is sometimes they want an objective opinion from somebody that looks like them to help work through these issues. So not everything's about severe depression, not everything's about anxiety, and I think almost the time it's almost always about trauma. But we can argue that point. So now, here's what I want to get into next is how to get Black men into therapy. Yet again, some Black men, probably most, will flat out refuse, and it is something they'll never even consider. Now, if coming to therapy for those who will not consider it, then we have to provide other options for them to have an outlet to express themselves, not just physically, but to express themselves mentally and emotionally. One of the things and one of the misnomers is that men are not emotional. We are just emotional as women, if not more emotional. Let's just dispel that myth right off the top. And when it comes to insecurities, I can do an entire show on the male insecurities. So we could stop that. So just like any other human being, Black men need an avenue. Black men need a resource or a place to be able to process and to express and talk about the things that go through their head on a daily basis. Too many of us die early because we hold all of that stuff in. And whether we can't talk about it, don't want to talk about it, don't trust, or whatever it may be. So if you're in a relationship with a man or have a son, an adult son, here are some, and this isn't an exhaustive list, these are just some of the things that I believe that it's going to help you to get a Black man into therapy. The first thing, and this is particularly if you're raising a Black man or a Black boy, and then also if you're in a relationship with a Black man. The first thing we have to do is normalize emotions. What do I mean by that? We have to be able to normalize the expression of emotions. We have to be able to normalize through conversation, through talking, and so forth, and make it safe for men, particularly Black men, to express themselves verbally. We have to normalize this type of talk. One of the things I see, and some of the things that I've even experienced, is we're okay. I'll say it this way. Particularly in relationships, there's this contradiction of I want men to be this way, provider, tough, protector, and all this other stuff. And then in certain situations, the expression of emotions are seen as weak. You call it a punk, acting like a girl. You're more emotional than me, and all this other stuff. So there's this contradiction. And then when Black men act out, because we become emotionally illiterate, then we want to use it. It becomes a weapon against us. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Meaning is that if we want our Black men to act out less and become less aggressive, we have to participate in the development of their emotional literacy. We have to participate, and when I say we, I mean the people in their lives, particularly their woman, their mom, their spouse, whatever it may be. We have to participate in the emotional development of emotional literacy. What do I mean by that? Here's just one example. If a man decides to express himself emotionally and you throw it back in his face, you have lost that forever. So that's what I mean by normalize, and that's what I mean by being able to communicate and talk about thoughts, feelings, expressions, goals, and all of these things, and being able to have these conversations where Black men feel safe. Because if they feel safe with you and they trust you, and then you then suggest therapy because you've already started that process, they're more likely to come. They're more likely to say, maybe I should do that. Here's another thing that's going to help Black men get into therapy is if you feel like your man is going to have some emotional stress, some mental stressors, is don't project what you feel onto your man. Because what's going to happen is they're going to feel attacked. And that conversation about therapy is going to look some more like, so you think I'm crazy, or you're the crazy one, you're the one who needs to go, or whatever. So instead of projecting what you believe you see, the conversation should be and allow them to talk about what they're going through. And then ask them, what do they think they should do? Here's the thing. You're going to hear some very generic things like, well, I don't want to call them generic, but you'll hear a lot of other things other than therapy. And those things may work. However, they could be talking to a friend, they could be talking to a sibling or anybody else that they trust, which is fine. But the problem is when you begin to, or when a person begin to project their feelings and their emotions onto this young Black man, it's going to shut down the conversation. Here's another simple way. Simply ask them to go. Now, here's what I mean by that. When asking, it has to come from a place of care and concern. It cannot come from a place of something's wrong with you because you're ruining our relationship. Something's wrong with you and you're messing up. It has to come from a place of care and concern. I'm concerned about you. How can I help you? Would you like to go get help? How can I help you? So asking from a place of care and concern. Here's the other thing. Believe it or not, probably one of the most effective ways to get a guy into therapy is influence. Remember, I talked about normalizing. But if somebody that they respect, it could be celebrity, it could be somebody close to them, it could be somebody they look up to, or even respect from afar, using that influence can encourage a Black man to go to therapy. Because on one hand, if all of my friends saying that stuff doesn't work, most likely I'm not going to go because I don't want to be the weak one in the bunch. But if I find somebody or there's some influence from somebody that respects it and has done it and has positive things to say about it, then they're more likely to engage because they respect that person that has influence over them. Who do they trust? Who do they look up to? Who do they admire? Could it just be a sibling or somebody that they trust their judgment? Here's the other thing. Allow them to shop around. Oftentimes, not all Black men want a Black male therapist. It's a funny thing, but I don't want to go into all of that stuff. But allow them to shop around and find somebody that they feel they could connect to. And here's the thing, allow them to do several phone consultations to see if they can connect with this person even over the phone. So allow them to shop around. Now, here's the thing. Here's another thing. Allow this to be their project. A lot of women will nudge their men into therapy, and then they start making those phone calls for them. So you get a lot of women, hey, I'm calling for my husband. Hey, I'm calling for my son. Hey, I'm doing this, that, and the third. Okay. I'm saying, yeah, that may get them in the door that one time, maybe even twice. However, if they done their research and they're taking the initiative and then they feel comfortable with it because they found somebody that they feel like they can match to, they're more likely to come. They're more likely to engage in therapy. Here's another thing. Asking a lot of questions to the therapist that you're interviewing, so to speak. So if they have this freedom and they're able to research it and they're able to really search and find somebody that they really like, they're more likely to engage in it. And I'll say this, when I work with particularly Black men, our therapy doesn't look like a super clinical, I'll say to the lay person, it don't look like a super clinical session. I know I'm doing therapy because I'm particular about how I position a question or suggest things and that, so forth and so on. But for me, it's about at least the first, sometimes up to 3 sessions, it's building rapport. It's making a connection. It's building what we call a therapeutic alliance. And so I know a lot of Black men they don't want to be shrinked in the head. They don't want to be therapized, so to speak. So therefore, they want to feel comfortable, I should say we, feel like we're coming to have a conversation with a person who's a professional that may have some insight, but I don't want to feel like I'm going to the doctor or to this hair shrink that's going to do something to me. So I try to make my sessions with other Black men as natural as possible. So when we talk about how to get Black men into therapy, the influence, and I'm speaking particularly to the women in their lives or other influences, we have to normalize the process and we have to be able to have this conversation without making them feel like something is wrong with them. Meaning, blaming them for the problems, blaming them, whatever. Now, here's the thing. We on the outside may feel like they need therapy. But the moment in the heat of whatever conflict, we're telling the person you need to go to therapy, that insinuates so many different things. So that's probably the last thing they're going to do. The thing is, particularly for Black men, and it's probably, we could apply this in other places, is that this process and engaging this process is delicate. Now, there's Black men that are more open to the process, that has the emotional language and the emotional capacity to engage in the process and have these conversations and so forth, and are okay with talking about their experiences and their emotions and their traumas. But even then, we have to be careful to not make this process a threatening process. This is too important. Too many of us, meaning Black men, need to protect ourselves and get the emotional and mental help that anybody else needs. We're always at more risk. Believe it or not, we're at risk. We're at higher risk. And I've done the shows and talked about why we're at higher risk, so I don't want to belabor the point right now. However, if you're struggling to encourage a Black man in your life to get help who you feel like he needs help, these are some ways to be able to get them into therapy. And also, I don't mind having a conversation, just a natural conversation, and talking about the process to help them become more comfortable with the process. So I hope this is helpful. I hope it was helpful. Once again, my name is Jonathan Beauregard. You can reach me at Beauregard Therapy. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and you can also listen to the audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and what's the other one? Anchor. So I am Jonathan Beauregard, your host, and this has been Indestructible Souls, and we're out.